Hi there and welcome back. Some of our best loved and incidentally long-lasting musicals have one thing in common. Productions such as Fiddler on the Roof, Annie, Oliver, Chitty Bang Bang, Gypsy, Joseph and that amazing tech Dreamcoat. And dare I say it? Yeah, that one. All have it. Some would call it a box office pull. What is it? Yep, you guessed it, young people. So in this video, I offer a few tips and tricks as to how to survive working with other kids. Well, kids and young people. One of the many responsibilities of the music director, and no doubt the most time consuming, is of course teaching the score. The more experience you get in working with the many different companies and their own specific requirements, the more you will develop your own individual style of running rehearsals. Your adult companies will principally judge you on how you run rehearsals and how you go about getting the very best from your company. You'll develop a style and a manner in the hope that you'll be asked back to do their next production. There will be, however, productions where you will need to work with young people and children. And as much as some may try to avoid this type of teaching, you shouldn't be turning down music director work just because the production in hand requires children. And I say that through experience, but more about that shortly. Not quite the same, but certainly not the same as working with adults, we'll be working with teenagers and adolescents in general. Both these age groups will require some different and specific ways of getting your message across. So then, let's start with a few tips on working with children. I want to start by winding the clock back a fair few years to illustrate a point, and the first ever musical I directed. It was a production of Oliver. It was for my local society that had wanted to do this particular production for years and years, but the resident director at the time had refused to do any production that involved children. After 25 years and 50 productions under his belt, however, he retired. And guess what? They decided Oliver was the production for them. I was very lucky and had a team from the local scout group, children of members, and an Oliver that was so professional for his 10 years of age he would even pick up when some adults around him missed their lines. The question is sometimes asked as to whether one should use one or two teams of children, or maybe even three, in your production. Well, for me, I would prefer just to work with one team, as it's about half the work of working with two, or more or less. But nowadays, this may not be possible given the laws that surround children in performances. Here in the UK, and I'm not sure about legislation elsewhere, but there are some very strict guidelines and laws that govern using children in arts performances. Your license holder will advise on what needs to be in place, so make sure that your company has taken all the necessary precautions to ensure safeguarding. I'm not going to go into the myriad of legal requirements, but I wanted to emphasize how important this is. So then, let's move on to now how we start our rehearsal process with children. First and foremost, for those of you that don't have your own children or are not used to working with children, they are humans. Don't be tempted to talk down to them or use baby talk. Children, even small ones, are much smarter than we sometimes give them credit for. Many of you watching this video may have children of your own and certainly will know how much of a task and how draining keeping their attention can be. The attention span of a child will vary depending on age, but the most important point to emphasize that during rehearsals with children, you need to keep your energy levels high. Certainly, children below, say, 10 or 11 years of age will have a much shorter attention span, so try and keep these rehearsals to no longer than, say, 45 to 50 minutes. Anything longer than that will not produce a great deal of added benefit. Take time to explain what's happening in the song, what the lyrics are saying, but without any long explanations of meaning. Children have limited life experience, so avoid any long explanations into any meanings. Keep it simple but interesting. The use of imagery when explaining how you require a song to be sung is a useful technique. For instance, a song that requires excited anticipation, you may suggest that they think of how excited they were when they went on holiday, or a sad song suggesting how they felt when they had to say goodbye to someone they wouldn't see for a while. Using games and competitions between groups is a good way to encourage those children less confident to become more engaged in the task at hand. Split your group into 2 or 3 teams, maybe more if you have a large group. The competition is to see which team can sing the saddest or the happiest, the loudest or the quietest. Don't be tempted to name the groups as groups 1, 2, 3, A, B or C, etc. There should be no hierarchy. If you need to name groups, use colours or animal names, for instance. Remain positive and interested in what your company wants to share with you. There will likely be some strong personalities amongst your group that will want to take over and lead any conversation. Be mindful of this situation and remain firm to ensure the rehearsal progresses. Knowing when to be firm is a personal judgment and, to be honest, will only come with experience. But if you are organised, prepared as to what you want to achieve during the rehearsal in the time allocated, you will soon know how best to keep your teaching thorough and fruitful. Be mindful not to be patronising in any way or talk down to your company. Listen to the group and answer all their questions with clarity and simplicity. Remember, no long detailed answers. Remember to keep your energy levels high at all times, and after around 45 minutes of teaching this way, you'll certainly feel it. Working with teenagers and adolescents is very different. Remember, even though they are technically children, always speak to them as adults. Teens will instantly recognise if they are being patronised in any way, so always use the same tone and teaching method you would use with adults, but with some additional awareness. I would like to think that the majority of individuals in this age range would have a certain amount of self-confidence, given the fact that, after all, they are taking part in a stage performance. Having said that, teenagers in general can be somewhat shy and reluctant when it comes to completely letting go, so to speak. Self-awareness and not wanting to embarrass themselves in front of their friends can be something that needs to be overcome. Those with less self-confidence will soon be identified, and it's up to you to encourage them to become more self-assured in what you're asking them to do. This lack of confidence can sometimes be addressed by using competitive games, as we did with younger children. Say in a number that may require anger, have 2 teams singing towards each other in anger. Seeing their friends give it more, so to speak, can sometimes do the trick, but avoid any childish games or tasks unless it's required within the context of the number or character. Be mindful that teenage friends stick together, usually on the back row of the seats you've arranged for your rehearsal. Everyone in this age group, it seems, wants to sit at the back. Changing seating arrangements into circles, or one large circle if there's room, can help in this. Similar to when dealing with adults, those less confident can gain a huge amount by facing their fellow members, both from a general confidence viewpoint and when teaching harmony singing for those less confident when singing. Do all you can to learn all your young company's names. Just remembering a handful will soon show an unintentional element of favoritism which needs to be avoided at all costs. Then, as with children and adults, I would advise that when you plan your rehearsal, make sure you keep the numbers you rehearse varied. Start with a number that will get a quick result. If the group hear a harmonic result early on. You've earned respect. Some may disagree with this, but I don't like to start with the most difficult number containing lots of tricky harmony, for instance, assuming that you're going to start with it because it will take the longest to learn. It will soon result in boredom setting in. Varying numbers throughout the rehearsal will keep the group interested and hopefully more motivated. Touch on that more difficult number at every rehearsal by all means, but don't spend a disproportionate amount of time on it when you know the progress isn't as good as you'd like. Always be aware of attention span and be ready to change to a different number if you see attention levels declining substantially. I talked in a previous video about flogging a dead horse. The same is true here. If you think you won't get the desired results, change your expectations by changing the complexity of the harmony or the amount of part singing required, if you feel that by doing so you'll get a better overall result. It's good to get to know your young company, and not only by name, but what interests them, but without becoming one of the gang. If you fall into that trap, any discipline you may need to exert will become so much more difficult. To coin a phrase, given an inch, you can be sure that teenagers will always take that mile. So, being firm when attention wanders and ensure general discipline is maintained during rehearsals. Don't be afraid to run a so-called tight ship. Ask open-ended questions to encourage participation by all your company members. Encourage those with the less self-confidence we talked about also to get involved in the conversation. When asked a question again, avoid any long detailed answers, as the more time you spend talking, your group will get bored very quickly and their attention will soon be directed elsewhere. Try at all times to interact with your young cast, but don't get into the habit of lecturing them. Have patience, but remain firm. As with all types of rehearsals, be friendly and courteous at all times, and as difficult as it may be on occasion, stay enthusiastic about the number at hand. Don't be that director I mentioned earlier, and enjoy your time working with children and young people. They have a great deal to give, and we can all learn from those much younger in age in many ways, not least in what they can bring to the stage. See you next time.